chartered scientist, chartered engineer, clinical scientist, your PhD, deputy chair of the EBMA Expo 2026, and IHEM Fellow. Out of the many professional titles you hold, which are you most proud to have?
So they all stand out for different reasons.
For people looking to get into the clinical engineering field, what are the characteristics and skill sets you would say that you would look for or suggest people would be good to have?
So I think it's a logical approach to fault finding. So yes, a logical approach. Obviously manual dexterity, because obviously you've got physical skills in sort of taking things apart, putting them back together, and an inquiring mind, I think, because you need to understand processes and be able to search things out.
This episode is brought to you by British Medical Auctions, celebrating 10 years at the forefront of medical equipment resale and sustainability. Founded with a simple belief that high-quality medical technology should never be wasted, British Medical Auctions has spent the last decade redefining how hospitals buy, sell, and reuse equipment responsibly. Today, British Medical Auctions combines that 10-year heritage with the strength of the TBA Auctions Group, Europe's #1 auction network, giving healthcare sellers and buyers unrivaled reach, trust, and impact. As leaders in resale, circular healthcare, and long-term value creation, British Medical Auctions is helping build a more sustainable future for clinical engineering, not just for today, but for the next 10 years and beyond.
Scott, welcome to the show. Thank you for being my first guest. As you're aware, the aim of the show is shed some light on the industry and experiences of others. I'm extremely privileged to have yourself with the caliber and influence to get the show started. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, first of all, in all the time I have known you, only recently have I found out it's Anthony Scott Brown.
It is, yes.
Tell me about that.
It's a Cornish tradition. So male Cornish lads usually have two names, and they're usually called by the second name.
Okay. From a professional point of view, clinical engineering isn't a typical industry people land in. Tell me about that. How did you get into it?
So I originally started working for British Telecom, started as an apprentice, worked my way through that for 10 years. Didn't really see much in the way of promotion, so moved into clinical engineering. A post came up in a department called medical physics in those days, and I was a medical physics technician, and those names changed as the profession grew, I guess.
Okay. What we currently know as sort of clinical technologist?
Clinical technologist now, yes.
Okay. And then going forward, how long were you doing that for?
So I started as a sort of medical physics technicians. In those days, we were repairing things to component level rather than just board level. That gradually changed over the years. And then I became the medical device risk manager. So the first one in the organization, started to do things about risk and trying to minimize risk. And that led me to my PhD and developing a risk assessment tool. From then, got a bit of a research bug and then became the R&D directorate manager for the trust, where I spent 5 years. And then during that time, I got seconded to Plymouth Hospital's NHS Trust as a consultant healthcare scientist, working with their radiotherapy physics department.
Okay.
And then came back to Trelisk and then moved into strategic rolling replacement. So capital replacement of medical equipment. And that then also linked in with my drive for training new engineers. And then I became the clinical engineering lead.
Okay, and that sort of takes us up to from 1989, I believe, all the way up until 2021.
It did, yes.
And in the meantime, you'd also been moving into what you do now.
Yes, so in the sort of mid-1990s, I started doing a little bit of training for Hewlett-Packard, who were very big in medical equipment in those days. Did that up until probably about 7 or 8 years. Then my role as R&D manager was taking up too much time, so I was unable to do it. But then I started again in 2014, set up my current business, Health Tech Solutions Limited, initially as a part-time thing. And then since I've left the NHS, I can spend as much time or as little time as I want doing it, which is really good.
So how did you originally get involved with Hewlett-Packard? How did that start?
I went to some of their training courses. I thought they were really good, led by a gentleman called Andrew Frost, and who since left obviously Hewlett-Packard. And so I said, are there any opportunities to do some training or deliver some training? He put me on some training courses, and then I started delivering training for them. So different parts of the country. So we were doing them in 2 training centres, one in Stockport, one in Reading, and then on-site courses in different hospitals.
Okay. So it leads us up to Health Tech Solutions, 2014 to now.
Yes.
Who are they? How can they help?
So Health Tech Solutions originally started doing some consultancy work around strategic replacement planning, and I worked with a couple of NHS trusts in London to help them develop that. Then I sort of got in touch with a training provider and started delivering some technical training. That was where my bug started, really, around training. And so then from then I've started to develop other clients and develop bespoke training courses, really. So I think that's the niche market. I can then meet the demands of individual organizations, whatever they might be.
What does that typically look like? What does that portfolio of training courses consist of?
So I think central to that needs to be understanding the anatomy and physiology around the medical device that you're using, because that enables you to have a conversation with the clinical staff. And the clinical engagement, I think, is pivotal to working in clinical engineering.
Okay. Yeah, so you're seen as that extension, that arm of the clinical team.
Yes,
Understand
absolutely.
the environment.
Yeah.
Okay. With all the many pockets of the industry you're involved in, what does a typical day look like to yourself?
Ooh, typical day. Well, that varies quite a lot. So if I'm on site training, then I will usually travel up the day before, then an early start, and sort of deliver training material that's already been prepared. So I've already prepared it in advance, either to meet particular client's need or at their request. And then other days I will be writing training material. So I will be doing some background reading, bit of research on the internet, and developing PowerPoint presentations. But also central to that, I think, is the practical skills, so the competency-based practical assessment. So it's not just about the underpinning knowledge and the extension of the underpinning knowledge into the clinical environment. So what parameters are we looking at, and what typical values would we expect? And then sort of the technical applications of how do we test the performance of that device.
Where's the furthest you've travelled with the job? Where's that taken you to? What have you seen?
So I've worked remotely with a client in the US, in the United States. So I've done a couple of clients in the United States remotely, but actually traveling, I traveled to the Falkland Islands. I've supported them with some on-site training.
And where you've helped me out as well.
Yes.
Taking it was with a particular test equipment in the past.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. And how's that going? Is it an ongoing relationship?
It is, yes. So I've travelled there once so far, but I still work with them remotely, and hoping I'll get an opportunity to go back.
They've had a changeover in staff out there, haven't they?
They have indeed. Yes.
How's that worked out for your relationship you've built?
It still works because I still have a dialogue with their senior leadership team. So attend their medical device committee on a regular basis. So that still works, but the original dynamic has changed, obviously, because I built up a relationship with the head of department there over many years. And
quite an interesting travel route you took to get there as well, right?
Indeed, yes. So it's planes, trains and automobiles, but not in that order. So a train from Cornwall to Oxford, then a taxi obviously out to Brize Norton, and then a flight via the Ascension Islands out to the Falklands.
And how long is that flight?
So it's 2 flights of about 8.5 hours with a stopover in the middle of a couple of hours.
Exciting, right? It's always different what you can get involved with it.
Absolutely.
Within the industry.
Yeah.
Now, I am keen to know, out of the many professional titles you hold, which are you most proud to have? And the selection, are just the handful of selections: chartered scientist, chartered engineer, clinical scientist, your PhD, deputy chair of the EBMA Expo 2026, and IHEM fellow.
They come into different categories. So the chartered engineer is obviously a professional qualification. So I think that's probably gives my status as where I am in the profession, and that's the sort of highest level you can get through the Engineering Council. EBM Expo is obviously fantastic environment. It's the only expo for biomed engineers in the UK. So that's a fantastic experience and an honour to take that role for next year. And IHEM, yes, that's something I hadn't done before. So I'd been a member of IPEM, but moved into IHEAM because one of the things I'm looking to get is an authorising engineer, and I need to be a member of IHEAM for that.
So which one stands out the most, would you say?
Wow. So they all stand out for different reasons.
Okay.
So the EBME Expo one in particular, that's an opportunity for me to share my knowledge and experience to new and inspire new engineers. So I think that's a really good platform. And the others are professional qualifications or professional memberships and awards.
Your PhD, what is that in, and what made you go to that level of study?
So the PhD is in attitudes and perceptions of risk around medical devices.
Okay.
So yes, a protracted title. When I started training, delivering training, I thought I probably ought to have a teaching qualification. So I started off with City and Guilds qualifications, the 7307, which is a further education qualification. And then I did a certificate in education and a postgraduate certificate in education, and then a master's in education. And obviously studying is something I enjoy doing. So then I thought I'll do a PhD. And then because I was working in medical life risk, that was an obvious topic to link to.
Okay. And you completed that 2012?
2012, yes.
How long did it take to complete?
It took 6 years because I had some sickness in the middle of it. So I had a bit of a break.
Bearing all that in mind, the travel, the contacts, the titles, what's your greatest success you've achieved in your career today, other than being on this podcast?
Oh, obviously this podcast, yes. So I think one of the things that gives me the most pleasure is training new engineers and passing on my experience to them. So it's not just about understanding how a device works, but it's that practical experience of the 30 years plus I've had in the industry, which I can then pass on to new people.
And I imagine the relationships which you've built over that time, knowing these people, seeing their own development within trusts, private sectors, is probably something you take a great pride in as well.
Yes.
You know, they've had repeat business sort of come from making those relationships.
Yes, so I do get some repeat business, and I still keep in touch with some of those people that I met 25, 30 years ago. So I still regularly keep in touch on a professional level and sort of a personal level.
Good to know.
This podcast series is proudly sponsored by British Medical Auctions, Europe specialists in medical equipment resale, backed by the scale of the TBA Auctions Group, and proud to be celebrating 10 years of supporting clinical engineering teams worldwide. British Medical Auctions approaches resale as a responsibility, not a transaction, combining 10 years of medical auction leadership, clinical expertise, stakeholder trust, industry compliance, and global buyer reach.
We've got a few more questions for you here, Scott.
Okay.
What would you say are the greatest challenges you faced, and what would you say that currently exist in the industry?
I think the challenges in healthcare at the moment are sort of financial. So NHS trusts are under considerable financial strain. So that impacts clearly on training, but also it impacts on purchasing medical equipment and things like that. That's sort of part of when I got into the strategic rolling replacement program. So trying to sort of level out those peaks and troughs in financial spending and replace things in a more structured manner.
And what did you put in place to sort of help procure that equipment, extend the lifespan of equipment? What was some key attributes you found worked for you?
I think the important thing is clinical engagement at that point. So understanding what clinical people really need for a medical device, so what specifications they need, but also future proofing. So one of the projects I worked on just before I left the NHS was looking at patient monitoring. So I replaced patient monitoring across the whole trust. So obviously a multi-million-pound deal over several years. And key to that was how it would interact with other devices. So connectivity. So it needed to be able to connect in the future to electronic patient records, for example. And I think that's going to be starting in the next year or two. But that was 5 years ago. So, that's one thing. Going forward, I think AI has got a
huge part to play.
Future and a big part to play. So we're looking at AI to help with diagnosis in endoscopy, but also the NHS, is looking to how they can improve productivity. One of the committees I sit on at the moment is the Science, Technology, Engineering Research and Innovation Council for IPEM. And one of the things we were talking about, I had an email about today, in fact, was what drivers could we help to improve efficiency? And one of the things I think potentially is that we can look at, one of the things we have in the US is we do not have anaesthetic rooms. So patients go straight into theatre and induction is performed in the theatre. So there's massive savings there. So an anaesthetic room will have its own anaesthetic workstation, its own patient monitoring, all of the other infrastructure. If you then save that across organisations, huge impact on saving and also time.
And how do you think that can be like retrofitted? Because these rooms are all there in your hospitals, which are 900 plus across the country.
Yes, so they will all be there, but over a period of time, when you start to replace those anaesthetic machines, you replace 50% of them, because you don't need one in the anaesthetic room and one in the theatre. You just need one.
Coming through the ranks, is there anyone you looked up to, mentored you during your time at different phases of your career?
So different people in different parts, I guess. So the Director of Healthcare Science at Plymouth Hospitals Trust at one point, very inspirational, good clinical engineer. Andrew Foss at Hewlett Packard, who got me involved in...
Got the ball rolling.
Got the ball rolling for training. So yeah, they're two of the key ones, I would say.
Okay, and you're still in contact with...
Still in contact, yes.
Yeah. For people looking to get into the clinical engineering field, what are the characteristics and skill sets you would say that you would look for or suggest people would be good to have?
So I think it's a logical approach to fault finding. So yes, a logical approach. Obviously manual dexterity, because obviously you've got physical skills in sort of taking things apart, putting them back together, and an inquiring mind, I think, because you need to understand processes and be able to search things out.
Do you think it's easy for people to get these roles?
No. Well,
I think the pathway, rather, sorry for a word about it, is the pathway easy enough to get in, and is the skill set here for that engineering force?
So there are pathways now starting to come through. So there are apprenticeships starting, and some of the hospital trusts now will have their own internal pathways. So they'll take people in at an entry level and then put them through a series of training courses and then gradually build those up. So then they take on more senior roles as they progress and specialise throughout their career. So I think that's sort of starting to come about more so now. So yes, there is that, and then there's other schemes that are coming around as well. But certainly the funding through apprenticeships would be a good driver. Okay.
What else do you think can be done to help support new blood getting into roles within both the NHS and the private sector?
So I think a lot of the sector has actually benefited quite a lot through exposure during COVID. So COVID has seen clinical engineering sort of come to the front and has been more outwardly understood, whereas prior to that it's something that happens in the basement and nobody actually deals with it. It's just somebody you take the equipment to and it comes back fixed. Whereas during COVID we've seen that's the impact of that on how it supports the clinical team. So it's actually an extension of the clinical team.
Now I came from near neighbour technology. I had 6 weeks field shadowing OEM training, and I was the last to go through that particular process down at Eshman. Is there any bare minimums you would say are required for the individual to get into the market? Because it took 3.5 years of me being in that field-based engineering role before I got formal technical training by one of the big players in the market. Is there any preference you would see in people? Because there's a huge reliance on, like I said, that near neighbour technology, just so we can get somebody with some technical ability, aptitude to bring in, train. Now, if I'd have gone into Ceris's sterilisation side of the business rather than their theatre side of her team, I would have spent time at one of the big training providers doing that courses, which you then have to renew on a periodic basis. You may know the period for that.
It's probably
2 years,
2-3 years basis. Yeah.
Now for me, I took that side step and it was just in-house OEM training, and away you go. The next thing, you're taking a diathermy apart on your own in the field after a bit of hand-holding. Do you think there should be, even within that private sector, so a bare minimum of industry-specific education before you're let loose on any medical device of any critical status?
Yes, I do, because clearly patient safety is the element at the end of it. So I think the grounding point needs to be electrical safety testing. That's fundamental, but then also understanding the clinical application of that device, because then you can understand actually, even though it might be performing, will that be performing right when it's connected to a patient? And I think that's the key element there.
No, I think it's something which I would have hugely benefited from, and I think a lot of people I've experienced coming through would have reaped the benefits of the dedicated training providers out there in
Yeah.
the field, and there's a lot of people out there learning it as they go.
Yeah.
Well, having the right foundations before you're out there working on equipment, which is like you say, that's touching patients, saving lives, and
Yeah, absolutely.
making a difference.
Yeah.
We've already touched on this, but an important and emerging topic for you, the authorised engineer.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So authorizing engineers traditionally in an estates role, so in the sort of infrastructure of the organization, so medical gases, electrical, water, things like that. It is a new role that's emerging in the medical equipment field, and it's something I've got an application in for at the moment. So watch this space on that one.
Oh, excellent. Look forward to seeing where that goes.
Yes.
Away from work, tell me something people would typically know about yourself.
Well, you've already given away my secret of my first name, so obviously we won't go there. But in the past, my hobby was flying single-engine planes, and I flew to France and to Ireland and Jersey as well.
Okay, so you say in the past you're not currently practicing?
Not currently practicing, no.
No? When did you knock that on the head?
So, well, basically before my daughter got born, so
Okay,
quite some time ago.
nice to pick that one back up when you can.
Yes.
On an important note, final note, where can people find you? How can they get in touch?
Okay, so obviously I've got a LinkedIn page under my personal name. I've got a website. On my email is health.tech.solutions.limited@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Scott, thank you. Not only for coming on today to support the show, but for your consistent support, knowledge and advice over the years. And I really appreciate you giving up your time and continue working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.